Hi, so in this video I'm going to show you an example lesson, and this sample lesson follows the EIF framework. This is a framework for organizing speaking lessons. It stands for Encounter, Internalize and Fluency, so it has 3 stages. It's kind of similar to PPP, Present, Practice, Produce, but it's got a little bit of a different way of especially introducing the language. So the encounter stage is more inductive and meaning focused. I do have another video on the EIF framework, so I suggest that you watch that first. Or you can go to ecrif.com, and this website gives you a more detailed description of the framework. Actually, the original framework is ECRIF, which stands for Encounter, Clarify, Remember, Internalize and Fluency. Okay, but clarify and remember are kind of part of the encounter stage. So yeah, so I suggest that if you're not familiar with EIF, that you watch my other video or go to the website ecrif.com and read a little bit about the framework first, just to help you understand about how this thing is organized. Now, this lesson is for young learners. It's kind of elementary school level, but it could be adapted for younger students or even older students. The steps could be changed. The level is high beginner, which means kind of lower intermediate, close to lower intermediate. The target language is body parts and describing people or monsters in this case. So, for example, he has big teeth, he has long arms. Okay. So this is an example lesson. Let's start. Now at the top here you can see a suggestion of what the teacher is doing, so you can kind of see the purpose for each step. And we're going to start with a question, and this is a guessing game. Can you guess the famous character? Okay, I'm going to give you some hints, and can you guess? The first hint is he has big hands. Okay, this is a guessing game. Can you guess? He has big hands. Who is this famous character? The next hint. He has small ears. Small ears. Next, he has a big mouth. A big mouth. He has green skin. And he is from an animated movie. Okay, can you guess? Now, before I give you the answer, guessing game is quite a nice type of activity for young learners. It encourages communication, builds their curiosity, gives them motivation and things like that. So yeah, guessing game is a really nice thing to do. And notice here the hints are actually the target language. So this is what I mean about EIF is a more inductive way of teaching language, because here the focus is on what the language means, not kind of an explicit deductive example or explanation of the language. Okay, so these hints are the target language, and the answer, the famous character, is Shrek. Okay, so well done if you got that right. Okay, so next we're going to describe this character. Do you know which movie this character's from? The answer is Toy Story. Now, are we the same as this alien? What's different? Okay, well, he has 3 fingers. He has long ears, he has 3 eyes, he has green skin, and so on. So the reason for this is kind of a brainstorm, but it also allows the teacher to assess the students' prior background knowledge, what they already know about the target language. So for one group of students, they might be able to explain quite well. For another group of students, they might only be able to say, 1 or 2 words to try to explain the differences. So this gives the teacher a chance to check what they already know and to correct any grammar mistakes that are happening here. Okay, so now we move on to the kind of scaffolding now. So we're going to focus on the vocabulary first. I haven't included too much about vocabulary here, but here you might do a drawing of a person, you might do a worksheet, you might have a game, pointing to each other's body parts. But the key point here is that you are focusing on just the body parts vocabulary. So this is the first step of scaffolding in the internalized stage. Okay, so you do some practice, some worksheets, some checking questions, and so on. Okay, I've got one example here. This is a TPR game, Total Physical Response. We're going to play a game similar to Simon Says, but this game has please. So if I say touch your nose, don't touch your nose. If I say touch your nose, please, then yes, please touch your nose. Okay, so let's practice. Touch your eye. Touch your ear, please. Okay, touch your head. Touch your nose, please. Okay, so you notice that when I say please, you should touch your body part, and depending on the students, if they're very low level, the teacher can give the hints when needed. But if they're a little bit higher level, you can stop giving the hints and just watch the students to check that they know the body parts. I like this activity because a couple of things. It includes the word please, and it's good to teach polite expressions. But also, you may have heard of Simon Says. With Simon Says, you say Simon Says at the beginning of the sentence. So students know that if they hear Simon Says, they should listen. If they don't hear Simon Says, then they probably stop listening. But for this one, with please at the end of the sentence, they have to listen to every sentence and remember what you said, because they don't know when you're going to say please. So yeah, I think it's a bit of an improvement on the normal Simon Says game. This is a good activity because it's checking the vocabulary that you've studied previously on the previous slide. It's also a kinesthetic activity, so young learners like active activities, and it's also listening to the vocabulary. So yeah, that's part of your scaffolding. Okay, key point here is it's checking. Okay, so remember that every time you teach, you have to check afterwards. All right, let's move on. Talking of checking, here are some checking questions. So this is control speaking practice, and specifically these are checking questions. So yes or no question. Is it an eye? Yes. Is it a mouth? No. Is it a leg? No. Okay, so yes or no question. Number 2, is it or Okay, so this is like an A-B question. That's what I call it. It's actually called differentiation. So is it a arm or a leg? Is it a nose or a head? Okay, so you're giving 2 options here. And then the final question is just open. What is it? 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 Okay, the open question. Okay, these are 3 types of checking questions. Notice the first one is the easiest, and they get harder. Number 3 is the hardest checking question. But key point here is that you should be asking checking questions, especially after you've just covered some vocabulary. All right, let's move on. Okay, so this is a second chunk of target language. We've done the body parts for humans. Here are some extra body parts that we can use. So number 1, what is it? It's a tail, yes. Very good. Okay, now notice at the bottom I've got a checking question. I just mentioned checking questions are really important. Number 1 is a tail. Which animals have a tail? Okay, dinosaur, lizard, monkey, and so on. Do humans have a tail? No. Okay. Does a cat have a tail? Yes. Okay, so checking questions, really important. Number 2, what is it? Claw. What animals have a claw? Eagle, tiger, and so on. Does a snake have a claw? No. Okay, number 3, fur. Number 3 is fur. Which animals have fur? Yep, teacher has fur. Lion has fur. Does a lizard have fur? No. Okay, number 4, horns. And again, you can brainstorm the animals and ask which animals have these, and some checking questions. Okay, so we've done the second chunk of vocabulary. Now let's move on. Okay, so what we're going to do here is reintroduce the full expressions that we heard at the guessing game at the start. So this is part of the scaffolding. Have a look here, you can see Stinky and Bongo. So I'm going to describe and tell you about Stinky and Bongo. You have to tell me, who am I talking about? Okay, so he has 3 eyes. Is it Stinky or Bongo? Bongo. He has 5 teeth. Stinky. He has pink fur. Stinky. He has 3 teeth. Bongo. He has green skin. Bongo. And so on. Okay, so you do some kind of like listening and guessing. And if the students if they're a little bit higher level, if they're ready to do this, you could have them, each student has to say a sentence and the class has to ask. Or if they're mature enough, you could put them into groups and they could do the guessing game together in groups. Okay, so the key point here is that you're kind of reintroducing these target expressions, and if the students need them, you could show these expressions as well. Okay, so again, now we're into the key target language expression. So this is a true or false activity. Here for the first slide, maybe the teacher could read and the students answer true or false. So number 1, he has a long tail. True. He has a big mouth. True. He has 2 horns. False. He has 1 eye. False. Okay, so you go through this together. And now the next slide, maybe you could have students asking and answering in groups, or this slide could be on a worksheet. But the thing here is that previously the teacher read the expressions. Now you get the students reading the true or false questions. Okay, so this is for controlled practice and for scaffolding those expressions. We're moving now towards free practice. So here we have some characters from this movie. We described the little green guy. Let's talk about the big guy with lots of fur. So he has fur. What other expressions can you tell me about the large monster? Okay, so as I say, this is moving towards free practice, and notice that there's a few examples on the slide, but we're starting to take away the scaffolding now, and students are starting to use the target languages by themselves. So you might have students saying, he has horns, he has big arms, he has a tail, he has a claw, he has purple spots, and so on. Okay, so yeah, you're encouraging them to freely practice. Now, we are moving on. We're close to the final speaking task now. So when you have a big main speaking task, it's a good idea for the teacher to do it first as an example, as a model. So you should have a modeling step before students do a task. So here we're going to prepare for the final communicative task, and here what I want you to do is draw my monster. So can you get a piece of paper and a pencil? Let's do this really. Okay, so pause the video if you need to. Go and get a pencil and paper, and I'm going to tell you about my monster. Okay, you back? You've got your pencil? Okay, so I'm going to tell you about my monster, and I want you to take the description and listen and draw my monster. Okay, so first, he has a big square head. He has 3 small eyes. Okay, so please draw. He has 3 small eyes. He has 2 noses. He has 1 big mouth and 2 tongues. Okay, notice I'm doing some visual support for you. Okay, number 5. He has 4 small ears. Number 6. He has spots. Number 7, he has a long body and no arms. Okay, I hope you're drawing. And number 8, he has 2 toes. 2 toes. Okay, so I hope you finished your drawing, and in a real classroom, you know, all of the children will be listening to my hints and drawing my monster. So let's have a look at your monster pictures. Everybody can compare and check, you know, what they drew and who has similar monster pictures. Okay, are you ready to see my monster? Here is a picture of my monster. Okay, so I hope that your monster is something similar. Notice you've got all of the same body parts as my hints. Okay, so the point of this step is preparation for the final task. This is like a modeling step because the final task is a little bit big and a little bit, you know, it could be challenging for young learners. So it's really important for the teacher to model. Okay, so what we're going to do as a final task is basically an information gap activity. Now, I would never say information gap to my students because information gap is a teaching term that only teachers need to be aware of. But that's what it is. It's basically an information gap activity. The purpose of this is to give free practice. Now, there's different ways of doing this. So let's just do this slide and then I'll give you some other examples of how to do this activity. So first, what I want you to do is draw a monster in your notebook and choose, is it a boy or a girl? Okay, so of course you give like 5 minutes, let students draw their monster. You can give some hints like, you know, claws, tail, wings, spots, and so on. So yeah, think about all of the things we learned, fur, eyes, mouth, teeth, and so on. Okay, next, now your monster is a secret, so don't show your partner, okay? It's a secret, so when you're drawing, don't show your partner. And number 2, what you're going to do is describe your monster to your partner. Your partner will listen and draw your monster. Now you might need to reorganize the class to do this. Usually with an information gap activity, you have a line with student A on one side, student B on the other side. They're facing their partner so they can communicate, and they're not going to see each other's work very well. So if you're teaching young learners, you might want to rearrange the classroom, or at least kind of make sure that students are not sitting next to each other and looking over at the other person's drawings. Okay, so yeah, information gap activity, they're sharing the information they have, which is the monster. Their partner has the gap, which is the blank page. They have to listen and draw. Good thing about information gap activities is they are good for communication, because to complete the task, students need to communicate. So after students have finished drawing, you can compare your monster drawings. That's number 4. Are they similar? And number 5, let's describe our monsters with the class. So there's lots of things you can do with this. You could have students, showing their monster pictures. You could put the monster pictures on the wall and do like a guessing game with descriptions. There's lots of different things you could do here. Now, I did mention there's different ways of doing this. What I've described here is kind of like the most advanced version. You can simplify this lesson for younger or lower level students. So some other things you could do is you could have students write 5 sentences about a monster and then draw the monster. And then when they come to describe the monster, they read their sentences. So that's like a really kind of scaffolded, less free, that's more controlled for lower level students. Now, if the students are very young, what you can do is everybody draws the same monster. The reason for that is because very young students can't work easily in pairs or groups. So a typical traditional information gap activity is student pairs. But for very young learners, they can't really do these tasks by themselves in groups. So what I suggest here is everybody says a sentence, they share a sentence with the class about the monster, and we all draw the same monster. Now, I've really done this with a group of young students. They really enjoyed it. And it just keeps the whole class together. For young students, it's better to keep the whole class together. And it also gives the teacher a chance to check and correct any sentences and also help any lower level students. Okay, so there's a few different ways of doing this, and you may have seen versions of this in textbooks as well. This concept of describing monsters for body parts is quite a common concept. I've seen worksheets as well related to this. So, you know, if you're thinking about doing this kind of thing in your lessons, have a look online. You can probably find some kind of describing monsters activity worksheets as well. Okay, so that is the fluency task. You could have some extra stages after, such as guessing the person's monster with the monster pictures. But the key point here is this fluency activity and the communication here. Okay, so that was the objective of the lesson. But here you have some of the target language. So notice here is the structure of the language of this lesson. So yeah, have a look. You've got it, he and she, has, number, size, color, body part. Now, if you think that you want to include some of this grammar in the lesson, you could do something like practicing the different adjectives here, getting the adjectives in the right order. It could be something like a gap fill activity where you gap some of the sentences and have students putting the words in the right places. Okay, yeah, so they could be some grammar focus, could be after, or it could be part of the scaffolding for lower level students. Okay, so yeah, I suggest that this lesson can be adapted in various ways. So here is the lesson against the EIF framework that I mentioned at the beginning. So at the beginning, students encounter the language through the guessing game. Then they practice with the vocabulary, and then you introduce the target expressions with controlled practice. Moving towards free practice, you model the final task, and then the final task is drawing and describing monsters. So that is the lesson against the EIF framework, and I hope this gives you some good ideas about how to organize the steps of a lesson, how to scaffold speaking, especially for low-level learners. They need that support and controlled practice in the internalized stage. Yeah, so I hope that was useful. Thank you very much.